Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I've got another friend of mine, Melissa, from the education sector, and I'm coming here as a learner to see what's been going on since I've left school and catch up a little bit. So, Melissa, thanks for coming on the podcast. Good to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
So, I want to dive in about how you even got into being in the education sector to begin with.
Well, originally I had said I would never be a teacher. Even as a kid, I thought that was the worst job imaginable. I was always interested in medicine, and then I went abroad and did some missionary work in Ireland, Norway, and South Africa. And we ended up working a lot with kids. And that kind of really started off the change. And then I was in my classes. I was in a medical sociology class when I really felt the Lord putting on my heart, is this really what you want to do right now? And I had a couple dreams where I felt like the Lord was saying, you really need to change and go into education. And though I was not too thrilled with the idea, obedience is really the most important thing. So I switched majors and went into it. And throughout my schooling, I had the opportunity to work with quite a few different people, and it was a really great experience. And now I work for a charter school that we started. So I was one of the founding faculty on this brand new charter school. So
Oh, no kidding. Okay, so you were actually going to go in the medical field first before going in education. Okay, that's good to know. Um, so, becoming a teacher, was that going through your first bachelor's degree and then applying to uh, another, like your teaching credential to get that done? And um, how did
so
that go?
the process is interesting. It Originally I was a biology major, and then I was able to switch over my major into educational studies. Some call it liberal arts, depending on what college you're in. And from there, I finished off my degree. Mine required to have a minor, so I minored in biology. And then I went immediately into the credentialing program with my university. It was a week after I graduated from my undergrad that I went into credentialing. Credential program was a year long, so 3 semesters, summer, fall, and spring, where you are taking classes while doing student teaching during the daytime.
Gotcha. So, you're demonstrating what you're going to be doing before you even dive in. Did it come with doing your master's in education too, like some programs do, or was it just going for the
Um,
teaching degree?
Mine originally is for the teaching degree. I would need one more year to get my master's, and I haven't necessarily pushed for that as of yet. I'm still wondering whether I want to continue in this field or not. So I'm leaving my options open before I put my money down.
Gotcha. But it's still kind of on the table depending on some conditions that come up in the next couple of years or so.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay. So, how old do you think um, you've been making an impact since you've been getting into education? So you open the door, you've got your teaching credential, and you've got your first job. How much impact do you think you started to make in your first few months of teaching?
At first, you feel like you're just along for the ride, and you're it, it. Most teachers have said that when you first start teaching, like the first 5 years are the worst, but it gets better. Um, I just finished my year 3, so I'm coming to year 4, and I'm waiting for it to get better. But when it comes to impact, I think it's just the little things that you see every day. And it's kind of where you choose to employ your efforts. In my first year of teaching, it was really rough, and I had some difficult students, but I think one of the impacts I saw was the importance of connecting with parents, because sometimes it's not you for the kid, it's you for the parents to help the kid and for their families. So it's kind of like discipleship in a totally different way because you're helping them with going through really difficult process in life. Helping a kid grow and learn is not easy. So I think my first year teaching, I could pinpoint it to one moment where I had a conversation with a parent who was just desperate and saying, I'm doing everything I can. I'm praying every morning. And it's just that important time for me to say, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing. And we're going to continue to work together to help him. And so I think those conversations are super important. And as I've gone further along, I think my impact has shifted focus just a little bit into helping kids learn accountability with their work because I'm noticing a lot of my students really struggle with following through and believing that there are either consequences, positive or negative, for anything that they do. So whether they are turning in their work on time and doing their absolute best, yeah, they're going to get some positive rewards of encouragement and feedback. Whereas those that aren't necessarily doing their work on time, they're getting the opportunity to work through it either with the teacher or with their parents. And I'm holding to them to the standard that even if it's late, they still need to do it. So I think my impact is more teaching hard work and accountability. That's where my focus has been for the last 2 years.
Preach it. Yes. Well, because if you can get that done right early, it's man, the impact you can have as a human being later, like they're going to be like, oh, that's the person we can count on. And that's what we need.
Absolutely.
We need more of those people out there. So I'm really glad you're doing that.
Yeah, I noticed that one of my students, I asked her what she would remember from being in my class, and she said hard work. And I've had plenty of students that have struggled like with their reading scores. I teach first and second grade, so reading is a huge portion, and I've had kids that I've sent on that still have not met the benchmarks. Excuse me, met the benchmarks for reading, but they are the hardest workers I've ever seen. And I don't worry about them because I know that they're willing to put in the work to get where they need to be. And I'd rather have a student that struggles but works hard than a student that is doing great but doesn't want to work at all for it. Because ultimately, when they become adults, that's going to determine who they are. Are they going to contribute to society, or are they going to sit back and let life happen to them?
Yeah, and to get that in at 6, 7 years old, I mean, and that they're going to have competing ideas about that. I mean, depending on what teachers and people in their lives. So getting that in early, at least you get more ground that way. And then maybe in third grade, they may have somebody that's not necessarily as accountable or someone who tries to make sure accountability happens. But yeah, no, you need that. Well, and they need it more, I'd say. That's cool. I've been hearing a lot of complaints about, like, because my mom's a teacher. So she was always talking about, yeah, you need to talk to the parents. But it's always that bottom 10% of these parents that have additional rules and regulations on how you're supposed to teach their one kid. And you have to, like, you got to play the devil's advocate on how much do I actually give time for them because there's still another 29 students.
Mm-hmm. I've definitely seen both sides of the spectrum. I've had those parents that have been really on top of, well, why did they get this score? Or how come they're not at a four instead of instead of being at a three? And explaining to them, well, four means that they're exceeding standards. That means they're above grade level, far above. Whereas some teachers might be grading a four as, oh, you got a 90%, you get a four. And so having conversations with parents to say they need to earn it versus that. And then there's those parents that aren't necessarily involved, and trying to get them more involved has also been difficult. So I've had both sides of the spectrum. And the jury's out on which one I prefer because both have their own challenges. When you have hardworking parents that just struggle to be involved with school, it's not that they don't care. It's just that it's really hard to get into those meetings. It's really hard to sit down with your kid and do homework every night. And so you might have 6 phone calls to that parent and they're not necessarily answered. And then you have some parents that are calling you 6 times a day.
And that's just insane. I mean, that's only one family, and there's multiple families within that one classroom. So that's crazy. And yeah, I can see the challenges of that already. I mean, just 6 calls. Would that be during working hours, off hours, either?
Usually it would be during my working hours, but when the kids go home. So the kids would be gone at 2:15, 2:30. So between that time and 3:30 or 4. Our hours end at 3:30, but we rarely leave at that time, as you're probably well aware with your mom. We put in a lot of extra hours.
And I mean, because the chaos is gone, so now it's okay. Rest, reload, get ready for the next day. Try and finish anything that was left over from the day, so you don't have to go home and think about it. At least give yourself a fighting chance for the next day. Yeah.
I think one of the best things that my master teacher taught me when I was in my credential program that I didn't necessarily listen to the first year and a half, which I should have, was go home. There is no reason for you to stay later because the reality is the work's still going to be there when you get there the next morning. And if it's not done now, then maybe it wasn't super important. So it's really helped me to be less of a workaholic and be at work until 9 o'clock like I did my first year of teaching. But it's definitely helped with my sanity. And I've noticed that it has not changed an ounce of my teaching during the day, staying versus going home. In fact, I feel like I'm much more prepared.
Gotta say, having that rest time and sleep, no matter who you are, that's you need it. It helps you make better decisions. Yeah,
It's true.
yeah. You, me, and your brother Matt we definitely put in the time in education when we were teenagers, and it was just we put in a lot of hours, and it just at some point you just gotta say, yep, yep, rest up for the next day because we'll be there again.
It's true.
That's good. Um, I wanted to ask about the technology. So again, I haven't been in anywhere near public school since 6 years ago, and that's only college. What kind of technology have you been seeing in the classroom that you didn't see when you were a student?
Honestly, it's incredible the amount of technology that we have. I work at a new charter school. So we started 3 years ago and we have one-to-one iPads for K through 2, in addition to Chromebooks. And all of the rest of the school also has iPads and Chromebooks available. And we're one-to-one for the entire school.
So every student has one.
Every student has their own iPad. Teachers have their own iPad and laptop for work. In addition, you may have seen smart boards, I think, when you were possibly in high school, here
Mm-hmm.
and there, scattered around. I'm not seeing as many of the smart boards anymore. What I use is in my classroom is Apple Television. With we have 3 uh, huge TVs in the classroom. So those are our displays that we run through. So I have a DocuCam where I can switch between my laptop, my iPad, and or just an image, so I can be writing on a board at the top, and it will go directly into my television depending on what I press. So it's pretty amazing. Like we do at our school, we have a video editing lab, so to speak. So our, because we're K-8, one of the electives would be to do video editing as a focus. So we have huge technology for that. I even have green screens in my classroom for the kids when we do sort of videos and things like that. And our programming systems are amazing. So when it comes to my classroom, a lot of my teaching is done in small groups. So while I'm working with the small group in reading, I have another group of kids that are working on their iPads on another task that they're working on. So I think the technology, though challenging, can be beneficial to manage huge class sizes and still get that individualized teaching. Although it can have some effects because they're really attached to the technology. So it's a really difficult balance to be at. And I know on those days when the iPads aren't working or the Wi-Fi's out, it is a really rough transition for us. And we're immediately sending out texts and emails to the tech department saying, we need you to get on this right away, because it's really, really hard for the kids to get into a different mode completely, and for teachers to go all the way back to paper pencil when most of what we do is with technology.
So different. So different.
Very, very different. My students, we have team meetings, so all of the kids are in a group and we discuss either problems with the day, or we do like a greeting so that we're interacting with each other, some sort of activity. And I've trained the students to be responsible for getting the iPad, because it's all led from one iPad. So one student will be the leader for the day and they will lead the whole team meeting. So they're responsible for getting the iPad, getting on the correct app on the iPad, and screen mirroring to our television. So they're learning at a very early age how to manage technology and the dangers of technology. It is, how are you paying attention to what they're doing all the time? And we still have, we have an app, we have Apple Classroom. So we actually can see everything that's going on every single iPad in the class from our teacher iPad. So there is monitoring with that. It doesn't always work, but it is nice because you can run all of the iPads through one lesson. So you can lead it from one and everybody's iPad goes to the same thing. Or you can lock all of the iPads so that they can't use them. So if you're really needing a transition and they are not getting moving, you just press the lock and they have to, although some have figured out how to get out of that.
There's overrides as a student.
They have figured out overrides. If you just do a hard, they will usually do a hard start on their iPad and it'll override the system.
Wow.
But they've gotten to be very clever to figure out these things.
Sure, their motivation to like, because they've got so much power right there on their fingertips. So I bet they're going, I wonder if.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the curiosity is just too hard to ignore. Usually, it's somebody that's. So what? So hard start, would that be like they just turn on their iPad really quick, or?
Hard start is the factory setting. So basically you hold down the home button and the power button at the same
Gotcha,
time.
that one.
So just like what you would do for your iPhone.
Yeah, so just a hard reset.
Yeah, hard reset. Yeah.
Got it. And then they're back in on the page that you just. Well, now they're unlocked, even though everyone else is unlocked.
Right, and so then I can go back and lock it again, but it's a constant battle when you're not 100%. So you're still trying to teach while having the technology and observing what's going on. So it's definitely a challenge to manage both at the same time.
Yeah, and like I can only imagine how AI, if that gets in the classroom, I'm almost like, How is that going to work? I have no idea. Like to me, you're describing a classroom setting I've never been in ever. So that's crazy. Have you ever had to play like the student role in that just to see what it's like from their perspective, or have you only done this as a teacher?
I may have done that when we were originally getting trained by an Apple representative, but it was very, very basic. So it wasn't really too difficult. Um, but I haven't really been on the other side of that. No, we didn't. When I was in school, we didn't have this opportunity at all.
Yeah,
I mean, I still remember the blue Max, and that was like the big thing. But
yeah. The clear plastic and the blue plastic MacBooks,
yep. Well, I'm still thinking of the desktops,
like the real big ones, like
the
the
real big ones. Yeah, that were like the TVs.
wow. Yeah.
But no, I think I never really experienced using iPads or anything until I was in college. But I know that it has been really beneficial for the students to have a variety of opportunities to do what they're best at. And a lot of the kids, they really struggle in some areas, but when it comes to technology, they are awesome. So it's an interesting way to see how brains work because some will struggle with the iPads, and it's always a challenge when we have to retype in all of the emails and the passwords every year and then get the kids logged in because until we train them to remember their passwords, it's us doing it every single day. And so there are some kids that will go the entire year and not remember. And then there are others that within like the third time, they're already in and they're good.
Surprised they don't have like a fingerprint scanner or something, so that way it'd be a little more convenient. But not, I mean, fair enough then. So you're playing IT to some degree, like first line of defense IT, security
Mm-hmm.
for looking, monitoring to see what people are doing on their iPads, and teacher all on this at the same time.
Yeah, funny story. My coworker had told me this is not too long before we had to close due to COVID, but she had called me and said, I can't get on my Wi Fi, everything's shut down, help. And for my team, there's four of us. And if there's a technology issue, usually they'll give me a phone call and say, hey, I don't know what to do. So um, I said, hold on for a second. I think I see my friend outside. So one of my closest friends, he teaches third and fourth grade. So he was walking by my door at that moment. And I grabbed him inside and said, hey, watch my class. And I ran down the way to the other classroom and jumped in and had to log her back in, had to restart her Wi Fi, change the Wi Fi settings, and get everything rebooted so that I could run back to my class. But it was a funny experience, but it's not the first time that we've had to do funny things like that. But you definitely have a lot of spinning plates going on.
Yeah, the game has changed so much. So in that case, with the other teacher that couldn't log on or anything, so you're just doing basic IT work to get her back online, and then running back to your class to continue teaching.
That's the way it goes. Yep. And we all kind of have to pull for each other. That's the one benefit I think of teaching. If you can get into a really good school, um, like for my school, all of the teachers that are in it were specially picked for their position. So they fit within the philosophy of the school of global education. They are believing in use of technology to benefit students. They're all about individualized instruction. So they all have to have specific skills in order to teach at this school. And then not only that, but the people that teach at our school, I just feel like it's amazing the people the Lord brings together because they are incredible in some of their giftings and talents. So it's kind of neat. So we just call each other whenever we need something. that we know somebody's specialized for. So, like the guy that I brought in to watch my class, we go on snake hunts at school when the gopher snakes have babies during the springtime, and we catch them and then do a whole science presentation on environments with the snake we caught. But we all kind of have different giftings, and that's one of the benefits I think of working within a school is you have a meeting of the minds.
Yeah, you're not in it on your own. That's the good thing. Yeah, it's good. And then I bet you've probably got other people that are like really savvy at IT work, or some people that are really good on the personnel side with students, and then maybe a lot of people on the hybrid end. Um, that's good. So, with all that tech stuff in mind, I guess things got even more accelerated when COVID hit, because now you're facing challenges that are like one more tier. So, I guess the next question being, what challenges are you facing now that you didn't have to face during COVID or pre-COVID?
COVID provided a very interesting switch in schools, I think, overall, because we overnight had to become tech wizards and find ways to connect with our students. So the moment we found out on a Friday after work. So some of our teachers, we had all gone out to dinner, and we all got the same message at the same time sitting at dinner. By the way, you're not coming into work on Monday because we are shutting down for COVID. And so that weekend, all of the teachers were pooling resources, messaging parents, getting things set up, ready to go and get kids connected so that they're not completely at a loss the moment that they're not in school. So we had the benefit with the tech of having licenses for students to practice certain programs. Like we have a program that helps teach reading skills and writing skills in like the grammar areas. And some of us have paid for programs that do math skills or other things. So we've had enough licenses and they're available at home as well. So we were able to connect parents with those that we already did have, just as a transition point. Um, but then after a week or so, we had started having Zoom meetings with our staff and with our teams twice a week and trying to figure out how to make things work. And so we jumped in and we created our own website for our school in particular. So with that, we had a website, we had pages for each grade level where we had to learn. I learned Google Sites overnight, which is really exciting because it has benefited me so much. So I was really actually kind of excited for the opportunity of COVID because I got to work in an area that I don't necessarily usually work in, and I enjoy the tech. So I was learning a whole bunch of different things. So we built our own website with resources that had hyperlinks to everything, that had videos available so that our parents had a place to go for their kids. So after that, probably about 2 weeks in, our district kind of jumped in and said, by the way, here are the restrictions for what we're doing. You can't do X, Y, and Z. So we're like, oh, great. We can't do Zoom calls. Okay. So we can't connect with them like that. Nope. You can't do these certain apps are not available because they're not approved by the entire district. So it ended up being a real challenge because now we're like, we already did it. And you can't take that back now. They all have the passwords. So at that point, we had already done it before any of those restrictions came into place. So, I mean, it ended up being fine, but you can't take back what parents have had since the beginning of the year. They've had the licenses and the ability to have their kids log on from home since school was in session. So, and the only reason that they had said that is because they were concerned with opportunities for students. Because we live in a lower economic area, not every student has access to internet or that sort of thing. So that became a huge problem because of equity. If you give it to one student, then you have this student that can't even access it. So it became this balancing act between, okay, I want to provide this for everybody, and I'm not meaning to not be equitable, but I want to make sure that at least I can support as much as I can. So it was a real hard meeting point, I think. It's like a rock and a hard place for teachers because they wanted to do what they could, but were being kind of pushed into a corner because we can't help everybody. We don't have enough tech for the entire district. And we did try, like our school was able to get out technology to those students who we felt had the most need. So that helped a lot, but not every area was that fortunate. Because our school owned a lot of the technology, we were able to contract it out versus other parts of the district. But it became a real challenge for us to even go through that. And then it was frustrating to see other areas that had iPads or computers out to every student in the district, and they were doing Zoom lessons. They were able to teach from home, and we weren't allowed to teach any new material for the entire trimester. We were not allowed to teach any new material because you can't ensure that everybody's getting that instruction. So the district created curriculum packets, and we connected with parents and made sure that they got them if they wanted them. It was not mandatory to do them. And so the kids would work through the curriculum packets, and the way that we were required to connect with parents was to call them once a week at least, to connect with them and see if they need any help. So that became a challenge because some of the parents are essential workers. So you're calling them and they're not even with their student. And they may or may not be doing the curriculum packets. And I don't know if I got any questions about the curriculum for the entire trimester. I'm not sure I had any questions about what was in those packets, if I recall anything. So mostly it was just checking in and saying hello.
Wow.
So it was a real challenge for the workaholic in me that was wanting to do things, because it was like being a horse at the gate and wanting to get out, but not ready yet. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to go about it, because we have not heard what's going to happen when the fall semester starts. So it might be a hybrid. It might be like a half and half. So half the students come in the morning, half the students come in the afternoon, and we balance that 5 days a week. Or it would be 2 days a week at school, 3 days teaching online. Or we go back completely. Or the other option is we teach entirely from home. So each one of those areas has its own significant problems and struggles. You've got half days, you're teaching half your kids and half the other kids, but you're going to have to restart everything in the middle of the day.
God, man, you might as well have a shift work for the teachers then, because then every time that second batch of kids comes in, you got to reload again and go, oh, these are different kids. They're fresh. So then that comes with its whole slew of problems. I can imagine that being a big downside.
Or you get the 2 days on and 3 days off, you're having to switch between teaching in the classroom to having everything entirely online, and the difficulty and the resources available for those lessons. And that's challenging because even my teaching an environmental science class for 2 weeks, I was doing lessons that were 10 to 20 minutes long, and it would take me between 4 to 8 hours to make. So, depending on how detailed I want to be and how supportive I want with visuals and all of that to make it interesting. And so, when you switch to an online component, you're not only having to learn the skills to do it, but the amount of time it takes to make that possible is huge. Whereas when you're in your classroom, you have the benefit of spontaneity. And you also have half the kids in the class, or however many kids in the class, to help out and make things happen.
Gotcha. Yeah. Significant downsides, though. That's crazy. Yeah, the in-person spontaneity is big because on if you have to immediately help somebody else out, you can. It's your choice. I mean, you may still have to sacrifice one for another and come back or whatever, but it still is your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Well,
Yep.
hopefully you guys get some more word on that.
Yeah, we have not heard yet, and it's a problem that's all over the country right now. I've been reading posts on media about everybody's different circumstances. Some are saying they're going back 100%, going back in, and for those, the teachers are like, "Well, I have two babies at home, or I have an autoimmune disorder, and I can't be exposed." Or you consider those that are going back to work, but then their kids are in a different district and those kids are not going back. How do they manage childcare for those kids while they're working? Or if a teacher gets sick, how are they going to manage that? Are they going to run out their sick time? I think some get between 10 and 11 sick days a year, but if you have COVID, the quarantine is 14 days.
Yeah, it's just
So
you're at your sick
there's
time. Yeah.
there's no way to get around it. And then exposure for an elementary school teacher, you might be exposed. If you were to get sick, you might be exposing 30 kids and their parents. But then if you are a music teacher, a specialist, you're seeing half the school. So if you were to get sick, now all of those kids would be quarantined if that were to be the case. And then say you're going to every classroom or you're a maintenance worker, you might be coming into contact with the entire school at some point. So the there are downsides to every single one of the options right now. There's really no good way to solve the problem, and it'll be really interesting to see how they solve it. I mean,
Yeah, I'll keep myself posted on that. That's I'm curious what kind of analysis they do to try and come up with an answer. Because
I our school district has been sending out surveys to see what parents would appreciate, what teachers would appreciate, and I know some districts are doing that, and others there have been no surveys at all. So it really comes down to the methods of who's in charge of managing that, and ultimately the needs of the community.
okay, well, hopefully the surveys will give you enough feedback to maybe turn the tide toward okay, well, this option sucks, but this will impact the most people for the best
Mm-hmm.
without it being a catastrophe. Like
Right.
maybe some of these other options might not benefit our district very much, and that would help them make their choices. I'm glad they're at least getting some reconnaissance out there, trying to see what would be the best choice by asking people directly.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, COVID's something else, man. I've seen it impact the pharmaceutical industry, and and it's funny because when I go to work, it's just nope, keep going. And it's just my eyes just kind of get really big, and I go, okay, cool, we're essential. It doesn't seem like much has changed. And then I hear about your stories, and I'm just like, uh, a lot's changing. Like it's upside down.
It is hugely, it has hugely impacted education and has forced everybody to relook at the value of education and how it is done because it's been done kind of similarly for a very long time. And while you get handfuls of places that are becoming a little bit more progressive, this has forced everybody to jump in the boat and say, okay, we're going to figure this out. We got to figure it out. Otherwise, these kids are suffering.
Yeah.
So, amidst having the ashes, there is still some beauty in it, in the sense of now we have to look at it. We can't sweep it under the rug anymore. We have to find ways to change some of those problems that we see.
The good news is, so long term, there's actually some good things that are probably to come from this.
That's the hope.
I think there's some hope there, because it's what you said. People can't ignore it this time, so that means something will have to get done, regardless of what people feel or if they want to sweep it under the rug. They can't do it. So that to me is hopeful because those bottom 20 percenters, bureaucrat people that aren't necessarily wanting to change the status quo, are probably going to be more willing to fine. I'll actually support some kind of change. So that's good. And hopefully it's good change, not just more regulation or whatever. I had two more questions, and I know we're getting short on time, so we'll make this quick. Um, do you have any lessons learned from the education system as a whole? Maybe 2 or 3 points that you'd be willing to share?
I think that as a whole, some of the things that I've seen from the education system that I have learned from are the value of and the importance of working as a team and having supportive leadership. I think for that in particular has been my situation. I've had incredible leadership at our school, and it's not always that way, but my boss is extremely, extremely supportive and always willing to try out something new. And when she sees that there's an area that you're doing really well in, she's ready to go gung ho and say, go ahead and try it out rather than just sticking to the books. So I think one of the things that I've learned is the importance of in leadership having being a supportive leader rather than a regulatory leader. Um, you're going to have people wanting to work for you more when you're willing to give them a little leeway or support them in the things that might seem a little more risky, not dangerous, but uh, definitely not textbook.
Sure.
So I think too often we see leadership as the person that is going to sit and tell people what to do and how to do it exactly one way. And while that can be beneficial if you're just learning procedures, it's it squelches squelches the squelches the creativity of people. And many teachers go into teaching for the love of students, but also because they are creative individuals. And this is an avenue where you can be creative if you have the right team. So I think if there's one thing I've learned, it's that me being a type A person that likes things just so, um, leadership is not that way. It can be, but the best leaders are the ones that are wanting you to work it out and try it out. And it's given me the freedom to be that creative and be spontaneous and teach science lessons that are a little silly or to go ahead and do video production with first graders. So I think that's one thing that I've learned. I think the other is that working as a team is always going to be better than just by yourself. Even if you are the best in your field, it is always helpful to have someone in your corner because there are going to be crazy days. I've had days where there's been an outburst from a student and who is now tearing up my entire classroom and throwing books everywhere and tossing chairs. And I escort the kids out and I grab my teacher friend that's walking by and ask her to manage the students while they are finding a seat outside. And then someone comes in to meet with this other student while I continue on teaching outside. But the value of just working as a team and knowing that there's always going to be somebody who's going to back you. I can call my friend in the middle of the day and say, hey, I have a student that's really struggling today. Can I send them to you? Have them count paper clips for a little bit or sort your materials. Sure, just send them over. And then by the end of it, you've had that kid needed a really long break. They've met with 5 different teachers because they've been sent on errands. And by the time they come back to your class, they're ready to learn again. So teamwork makes the dream work, if I'm being cliche.
Cliche is fine. We use it too. And yeah, the team is what's going to help get through the real hard days, and that's actually why I get mad when I don't get a team, because then it's just okay, fine. I guess I'll go lone survivor for a little bit, and if you do that long enough, it gets you kind of bitter. So
I've always enjoyed the lone survivor. That's kind of who I am. So it's been a totally different experience working as a team, and I get my moments to be that person that's gung ho. But instead of being a lone survivor, you're just the pioneer.
yeah, so
So
right. So what I was getting at too is when you're lone survivor for indefinitely and you're always outnumbered and outgunned kind of thing, and as you said, even the best in the field, I mean, you still would rather have a team if you need to deal with something that this is a team's worth of a job, not one person. So I had one last question about what would you say to recommending other. So let's say there's somebody who wants to get in the education system because they're inspired by something that they appreciate, whether it's students or getting in to help out just in education in general, but they're not quite sure what to do. Would you have anything to say to them?
I think I came in knowing that being a teacher is kind of like being a martyr. That you're not going to be paid much and you're going to be working long hours and you're going to be underappreciated. But I didn't realize how true that was until I started teaching and realized, oh man, did I really do this? And I am like waiting for the Lord to say, okay, you're done with teaching, let's move on. Um, because I'm tired and I've only taught for 3 years, and the vast majority, I think, I don't even know the percentage of people don't make it past their 5th year of teaching because it is so taxing mentally, even physically and emotionally, because you do get connected with these students. And there are many days that you're going to be going home crying. I mean, my first year, I was sitting on the floor of the kitchen, bawling, leaning on the back of the cabinets, really unsure of whether or not I should quit. And I was so ready to be done. So while there are huge benefits in the sense of working as a team and you get to interact with students, there are significant challenges in the field, and it is a struggle. And for me, I mean, if I were a teacher and I had somebody coming in, I would tell them to possibly rethink. If they feel that the Lord is leading them to this, then by all means, they need to follow and be obedient. But um, if it's just something that they think is going to be this beautiful illusion, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, unfortunately. It is tough, hard work. And It's like digging the trenches on a daily basis. So it's a struggle. There are some days that you have to hold on to, you have to find the positives in, because things go wrong every day, um, where you don't know how the students are going to be that day. Maybe one kid has had a really rough morning, and so then it just kind of ruins the entire day for everybody else. So if you're not prepared for the chaos, then it's probably not a good job to be in, because it is very chaotic on a daily basis. I think I remember there was a quote somewhere. I think it was a photographer or videographer that had once said, I never do work with animals or children. And it's because it's so unpredictable. So if you're looking for a job that's unpredictable, teaching's definitely for you. And if you want to be underpaid, by all means. Although if you work for 30 years, it works up. And by that point, you can have a pretty decent income. But I know I've been blessed. Um, I've only been working 3 years in teaching, and I own my own house. But that is not true for a lot of people. Um, so I don't currently have children to look after or anything like that, or to pay for. So I have the benefit of making things work. But I can't imagine how hard it is if you were to go into teaching and you already have kids.
Sure, I mean every kid's probably like an extra 14,000 a year after tax money. So there's definitely some sense there. I just want to let you know, Melissa, that I respect teachers, and I'm really glad you got to be here. And I want to let you know that I know I'm like 3 hours away from Visalia nowadays, maybe like 3 hours and change. But just know that there's people out there like me who really do appreciate what you're doing. And I do think it is the Lord's work, and I'm 100% supporting what you do for as long as you're doing it. Because I remember you in my high school days, and I suppose in yours too. And it was cool to see someone like you um, just gearing up for life. And I go, cool, you're taking a lot of that and instilling it into some of your students. So it's encouraging to see that. So just wanted to give you a little bit of encouragement at the very least.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, the goal in the end, our goal is to go into missions work, and every day in teaching is a missions field, really. And while we want to work with like third world countries and underprivileged populations, or those that are in very remote areas, um, I feel like I'm getting all of the preparation for that kind of dream. So if you want to be prepared for anything, this would be a job to be in, even though it is hard, because sometimes you got to learn from the school of hard knocks. So I guess I'm gaining the skills that I need for what I feel the Lord is calling us to, even though it is a challenge. So it's all about being obedient to his leading, even when it hurts.
well, it shows that what you're doing is like your convictions are absolutely like they're there. There's no question about it. You're putting your money where your mouth is when it comes to not just your faith, but also, yeah, I would rather be doing this as an occupation, but I can do this. God wants me to do this. Let's make it work. Let's see who we can help. And even though there's definitely those emotional days you're talking about, and that happened in my family too. I mean, it's even before technology really started getting a grip on the classroom. That same original challenge of teaching has already been there for a minute. So just want to let you know again that, yeah, thanks again for giving your opinion and for your expertise on this.